pledge. Tonight we have Pastor Donald Mushayamunda from First Christian Church. And if you will rise for that and remain standing for the pledge. And I do want to say this is the National Day of Prayer, so Pastor is going to do a very good one for that tonight.
Shall we pray? Tonight, Father, we recognize you as God of all people. In your word, through the mouth of your Son Jesus, you declare in Luke 8:1, men ought always to pray. And we know, oh God, we fall short. But as a nation, we have chosen that at least one day in the year, we could come together, bury our hardships, show each other love, fall under your banner, and pray. And so today, we resonate with the many prayers that have been said across the country. We pray for you to have mercy and grace over this nation. We pray for the executive. We pray that you may give them good hearts as they lead the nation. Give them the spirit of wisdom. Give them understanding and knowledge. Help them, oh God, to be good to all people and to commit themselves as devoted workers, not only to man, but to you, God. We pray also for the judiciary. They have so many matters before them. And most of the decisions are hard because the decisions affect people either way. But if you give them your spirit and your heart, they will decide as David did, with so much wisdom and grace. We pray also, Father, for the Congress as it sits to make laws for this nation, that you may take away selfishness from them. We pray that they be benevolent in every law that they use. We pray that they may seek for the good of all men in this nation. Father, we want to thank you for this city and for the fathers you gave us. We know they labor night and day over the affairs of this city. We know you love us all. It is amazing that you know each one of the citizens of this city with so much detail, which is why again your Son Jesus says, you know even the number of hairs on our head. So you care about how every citizen feels. And it's up to our fathers here to discern our needs and meet them the best they can. We commit all the business before them to you. We pray that they may acquire counsel from above. But above all, tonight we pray for a mighty anointing to fall upon them. We pray, oh God, that they be the beloved of this city, that they be known for their care, that they be known for their mercy, that they be known for their grace, that they be known for their kindness, that they be known for their presence. How we also pray for the citizens of the city, that they be called to good citizenry, that they be loving, honoring all men, serving each other in love, and honoring the fathers that God has laid before them. Help the citizens to cooperate with these fathers so that their business be easier. We pray tonight for the business that is about to be presented and for all who will speak tonight. May they be guided by your Spirit. And so we thank you, Father, because you declare in your word, if we seek trust is within us. And so we thank you in advance that this is done. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Commissioners, your first order of business is consideration of the minutes from the regularly scheduled City Commission meeting held on Thursday, April 18th, 2024.
So moved.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and second, any discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
I abstain, I was not present.
I'm sorry, the next order of business is public comment. We have, so under this, we have public comment, and we have 7 citizens who have signed up in advance to speak under public comment.
In just a minute, I will open the public comment. I will tell you that I will call the names of the people who have signed up to speak, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And we are not giving feedback to your speech tonight. We have comments coming at the next one on this same ordinance that you're speaking about. So if you will, when I call your name, if you'll approach the mic, give us your name and address, and we'll start your 3 minutes at that point. If you're going to say the exact same thing that the people in front of you said, you can come up and say, I agree. If you're going to add something, feel free to add. Like I said, it's your 3 minutes. So I will open the public comment, and first, Michael Miles.
Michael Miles, 2220 Lakeland Drive. Thank you for your service to our community. I have found nothing positive makes this development improve the area, only tax revenue. I ask you to vote no on the rezoning request, item 7.2 Princeton Road, Nave Drive. I sent you an email last week stating my concerns. Here are a few more facts. The 2020 land use element states to have consideration for infill rezoning and how it affects the surrounding areas. Safety hazards, entrance 150 feet from Princeton Road, increased traffic with no sidewalks in the neighborhood for walking, running, or biking. The traffic calming information states speed bumps should be at least 200 feet from the corner of the street. The proposed development entrance is 150 feet from Princeton Road. Princeton Road does not have a bike lane. Bikes use Princeton Road sidewalk and fly down the hill crossing Nave Drive at a high rate of speed. The hill coming down Princeton Road makes the intersection dangerous for walkers, runners, bikers today. Increased traffic will only make it worse. Why did the developer change the original rezoning request from R5 34 units to R4 24 units, 10 units? That's $2.5 million, 30% less revenue. Maps do not have dates or dimensions or change order information. Maps started March 11th, changed before April 3rd neighborhood meeting, changed before April 9th planning commission meeting. No legal descriptions have been provided to the public. Did the original rezoning request meet zoning requirements? Maybe it was rushed to get to the planning commission agenda next month. Deadline's the 15th of the month, letter sent to property owners March 11th. March 11th, the first concept plan called for 2.7 acres, 0.1 not usable. Times 14 is 36.4 units, building over the creek with a retention pond beside the sidewalk on Princeton Road. April 3rd, the second concept plan called for 2.7 acres with 43% of land not usable, leaving 1.16 acres as usable. 1.16 times 14 is 16.4 units. April 9th, the third concept plan moved the entrance closer to Princeton Road that increased the hazard and reduced the size of the retention pond. The rezoning application date, April 1st, stated required that 2 copies of concept plan drawn to scale that meets zoning code requirements. If a concept plan is required by the rezoning request, legal description requested area must include all dimensions, be it written, description, or map. Does the original concept plan meet zoning code requirements. No legal description has been presented at any meeting. The planning commission voted 6-2 to recommend the rezoning. 25% of the planning commissioners have concerns. Keep our neighborhoods safe. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Next is Regina Guess.
Hi, I'm Regina Guess. I live at 2210 Lakeland Drive. My concerns are, as everything he said, plus more. Also, the thing is, I understand there's a shortage of housing in Johnson City. I understand that. I feel like people are moving to Johnson City not to live in whatever they're trying to build. They're wanting houses. They're wanting communities. They want a community. They want a neighborhood like ours, okay? So if you're wanting to look to expand Johnson City, look at bigger land properties that are going to build neighborhoods like our neighborhood. We can't handle the extra traffic in our neighborhood. We have too many kids. We have too many people involved in running, walking, biking. It's not a valid way of putting something there in a small area to increase traffic in our neighborhood. I really can like for you to consider our neighborhood overall, not just as a big picture, not just a small picture, you know, because we want to keep our neighborhood safe. That's why we all moved here. That's why we're all here. We want to keep it safe, and we also want to let you know we don't want this here. You know, we don't want it. You know, if you want to build, that's too much in a small area. Thank you.
Thanks. Paula Eldred.
I was told that I could give you a handout. My name is Paula Eldred, 2223 Lakeland Drive. We have come in impressive numbers to every meeting and presented a petition with over 160 signatures in protest of the use of this land for the proposed development. Throughout all of this, our major consistent concern has been the safety of our children and families. We are quietly tucked away in the middle of the city, but all day long you see children playing in the streets, people riding bikes, scooters, pushing strollers, walking dogs. People come from other areas just to walk our streets. We watch out for each other, and we keep an eye on every child that we see. Our biggest fight for safety has been against speeding through our streets and using our neighborhood as a cut-through between Princeton and Mountcastle. Last fall, we put in speed humps to slow people down, but it hasn't helped as much as we had wanted, partly due to the fact that our neighborhood has very straight roads, as you can see by the pictures, which has since been prohibited in newer developments because of the speed concern. Using this piece of land for the 24 townhouse units and emptying that into our neighborhood makes no sense. It will cause more safety issues, especially for the children. The engineer stated that the traffic from the complex would most likely turn towards Princeton, but we who live there know that if you're going to the interstate, MedTech, or Indian Trail, you go to Princeton. But if you're going to the mall, Science Hill, Liberty Bell, Fairmont, JCMC, ETSU, any of that, you go to Mountcastle, which makes them cut straight through our neighborhood again. Even if they exited it onto Princeton, many people would still come through our neighborhood because they want to avoid Malfunction Junction up at Broyles and Roan. So they would cut through to avoid the lights and traffic. Our neighborhood is just in the beginning phases of flipping from younger to older, and we expect that in the next 10 years there will be a skyrocket in the number of children in our community. He first told us that we could not go across, it had to empty on Nave because they couldn't go across the stream. The state wouldn't allow it. But I talked to TDEC, and they will if the other exit is a safety concern. Why would you not exit onto Princeton, which is a collector street, instead of onto Nave, which you can see is a very narrow drive? There's also not enough parking spaces in their plan. There is enough by state law, but there's not enough extra spaces, and those people would end up parking on Nave just like you see in the neighborhood already. I think that they just don't want to do it because it is expensive to build a bridge across that stream that has to be 40 feet long and accommodate a fire engine. I challenge you tonight to take a look at the road pictures, the Google Maps. The road is narrow, the cars are parked. I want you to see that the land is not zoning maps and colors on a screen. It's a piece of property that would be best used for a couple more houses in our neighborhood. And I hope you see us as people, not as, see us more as people fighting for what is right and to protect our children.
Thank you. Keith Fields.
I'm Keith Fields at 2206 Nave Drive. I'm here to respectfully request this commission's help in thoughtful consideration regarding the rezoning of the property at Nave and Princeton. The previous meeting with the planning committee was incredibly disappointing and left the vast majority of people discouraged and with a diminished faith in our local government. It was obvious at the public hearing was only to placate the people who were against this proposal. The meeting with the planning committee basically was a farce where concerned residents watched as committee members barely paid attention, shook their heads in disagreement with people while they were speaking, and at times glared in the crowd, admonishing them when a few applauded valid points made by their neighbors. Everyone from the neighborhood felt like they had wasted their time and that the committee's decision was a predetermined, foregone conclusion. The entire neighborhood is thoroughly frustrated with the committee's decision. After petitions, letters, numerous emails, and many volunteering to speak their concerns, the final result was a minority of unelected people who do not have to answer to constituents and who are not directly impacted made a decision based on opinion that is not shared by the majority of people who are directly impacted. It was published in the Planning Commission agenda summary that the staff recommends to approve this request because it will resolve the current split zone condition and that rezoning will not have an unreasonable impact on the surrounding community. It's not an accurate statement. Nave Drive has 26 homes. The proposed development adds 24 more. So this proposal doubles the traffic volume at the entrance of the neighborhood and does nothing to lessen the congestion in the city streets as stated in Article 1 of the city's zoning code. This proposal also doubles the entire population of Nave Drive and does nothing to promote desirable living conditions or sustain the stability of the neighborhood, also stated in Article 1 of the city's zoning code. As with the population increase, there's increased noise, increased pollution, and inherent risk of increased crime. This proposal also does not, as per the city's code, promote desirable living conditions by protecting property against depreciation. Numerous studies have shown that townhomes depreciate faster and do not retain their value as much as standalone homes. There's no assurance of what will actually be built either. There's been little transparency with multiple iterations of the plans. It's a cause for concern when we cannot get confirmed or verified information regarding the developer or the type of construction or the quality of construction to be built. Due to the proposal having unreasonable and potentially detrimental impacts to the surrounding community and seemingly being in conflict with the city's stated zoning code objectives, as well as being opposed by the vast majority of the community, I respectfully ask that this rezoning request be denied and the current zoning retained. With regards to the split zoning issue mentioned in the staff statement, this could easily and more effectively be resolved by rezoning the parcel as R2. R2 is the preferred solution by the vast majority of people that are directly impacted. R2 is more aligned and in agreement with the city's stated code objectives, and R2 is more in line with the surrounding land use and is more favorable to the public welfare. Thank you all for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Laura Aiken.
Hi, my
Evening.
name is Laura Aiken. I live at 2216 Lakeland Drive and have for the past 36 years. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your service to Johnson City. Having spoken with several of you, I have a new appreciation and a respect for the processes, the responsibilities that you have for the future of Johnson City. And I really appreciate that you are willing to give your time and your energies to that and have, many of you, for many years. Thank you very much. Being almost near the last, many things have been said that I was going to say. My main concern is the safety of our little neighborhood. We do have, I've been there long enough to see the neighborhood flip from a lot of young families 36 years ago when we moved in to going to a more senior situation. And now a lot of the homes have been flipped and they're affordable for young families. And so we have a lot of strollers, a lot of pets, and also a lot of visiting pedestrians from neighborhoods nearby and the medical and dental businesses that are right there off of Princeton. You'll see a lot of scrubs walking during the noon hour. And we don't have sidewalks. So the car traffic is a concern. These townhomes are projected to exit onto Nave, which is very close in proximity there, so we anticipate a little longer time to get out onto Princeton if this goes through. My personal request is that you rezone this to a total R2 property. I do understand that something will eventually be built there. It's a prime location. That's why we live there. It has multiple zonings now and has for a long time. But my personal request is that you rezone this total property to R2 with a few new homes in that space would be great for our neighborhood. If you as a committee don't feel like that is best, however, I ask that you maybe limit the number of townhomes that could be built on that property. Mr. Dutton with the Planning Commission spoke at that meeting and stated that he even frequently walks his dog in our neighborhood, and that the townhomes right at the exit at Mount Castle, coming out of our neighborhood right there, didn't cause a problem. And they are very nice. They're nice brick structures, but there are only 15 of them. I think a lot of the confusion came at the zoning commission because things had happened so quickly, and there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation going around prior to that meeting. And many changes came about very quickly to the plan that was concerning, like has been spoken, that it went from 34 to 24. So, thank you again for hearing our request, and I request that you would seriously consider rezoning to R2. Thanks.
Thanks. Randy Greer.
Good evening. My name is Randy Greer. My wife Kathy and I, we live at 2317 Nave Drive, right across the street from the property. We still feel deeply that our home will likely be impacted most by this rezoning. Beyond our home and our neighbors, we've all heard they voiced their concerns. And just have to say that we see the result of this rezoning is we believe it's going to, these proposed units will have more of an unreasonable impact on our neighborhood than ought to be. And because of that impact, I just want to say that our motivation in being here tonight is, and voicing an objection is because we want to see a safe, family-friendly atmosphere continue in this community, this neighborhood. We see the development as introducing unnecessary stress from one end of the nave to the other, including all the several cut-throughs to Mount Castle, Kipling, Lakeland, and Brown, all are represented here tonight. And I'd sent a letter to each of you and highlighted the differences in the vantage point, the way that city planners see it, the planning commission, the way that you may be looking at it. And I wanted you to see the way that we look at it. And I took the, I guess you could say, the recommendation that's in your agenda, the 4 or 5 little paragraph there. And you're familiar with that, the planning commission's recommendation that's mirrored in the city commission's staff's recommendation. And I stand tonight for our family, for our neighbors, to present our recommendation. Nave and neighbors of Nave recommend to not approve the rezoning request because beyond the safety, the traffic, and other addressed concerns, rezoning will do little to correct the zoning variation in the immediate area. And that letter that I sent you explains more about that. The requested rezoning to R4 will result in a concentrated volume of residents which will have an unreasonable impact on the surrounding community. The proposed plan uses the prime portion of the affected land and without addressing the portion that remains, the 1 acre that's unusable. The R4 district would provide a non-efficient transitional zone with dwellings that fall out of line with past planning commission decisions regarding zoning in this immediate area. And if you're familiar with the agenda and you read the planning commission's recommendation, you know theirs, you've heard ours. And you'll notice that our recommendation is contrary to what the planning commission has recommended. But ours is given from a perspective of knowing that we'll be living based on what you decide. We're going to have to live with it. And I'll be right across the street from it. And to you as commissioners, we respectfully ask that you vote no to this rezoning request. We're here, this is a rezoning question tonight, rezoning vote tonight. we respectfully ask that you keep the zoning as is with the prime section remaining as R2. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kathy Greer.
Kathy Greer, 2317 Nave Drive. I live straight across from the property. I agree with what everybody said, and I appreciate all my neighbors. I ask that you vote no, because as some of the things that my biggest concern is the water issue. The water issue from Nave, from the whole entire neighborhood, flies down that Nave hill. It falls into that, you saw some pictures, I know there's a drain there. It has crashed and collapsed into the road. It's had to be repaired by the city before. Should be documented by the city. The problem is that water that comes through there is spring fed. You can't control it. It is one day, it's always there. It is never dry. Also, my other issue is on the plot. There is no dry creek showing on the plot. It's on the back of the property, and in the rainy seasons, that is water also, and there is buildings on it. You will have the part where the water retention is, that is another issue, because it's just marsh. It's like being in Florida and walking on water. You can't build on it. So, part of that is my big concern, is the water issue and the safety of the children that would be living there. Of course, there's gonna be children there. There's 24 units proposed. You do the math. Eventually, there'll be 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4 kids per unit. There's not enough space in that little area for kids to play. There is no green space. The only space not used is water. You can't build on it, so the kids can't play on it. So where are the kids going to be? They're going to be in front of my house while I'm working during the day remote. I'm going to be hearing the cars stop instantly to avoid being a kid hit. This is a major concern to me. I am a nurse. I don't want the responsibility of somebody getting hit in front of my house, because it would be my responsibility as a nurse to go out there and help, even if I am on the clock. So I'm begging you, for the safety of our community, for the safety of our citizens, not to bid this 24 units, because you can't do the math. I do old-timey math. I don't do core math. And I cannot add up to get enough parking spaces for this development, because it's going to be an issue to me, because they're going to be parking in front of my driveway. It's already an issue. There's days I can't get out of my driveway. And I didn't reach everything, but thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, the next, if you want to make your way down, the next is a proclamation. Or you,
Yeah, do you want me to end? Do I need to? I'm going to gavel out. Well, close the public comment section.
So Mayor, as you make your way down, I will read this, what this presentation is about. It's a presentation of a proclamation recognizing May 9th, 2024 as Children's Mental Health Acceptance Day.
Yeah, I'm Jordan Buchanan, family support specialist with Tennessee Voices.
I'm Heather Barham. I'm a care coordinator with Tennessee Voices.
The proclamation for Children's Mental Health Acceptance Day. Whereas addressing the complex mental health needs of children, youth, young adults, and families today is fundamental to the citizens of Johnson City. And whereas the need for comprehensive, coordinated mental health services for children, youth, young adults, and families places upon our community a critical responsibility. And whereas it is appropriate that a day should be set apart each year for the direction of our thoughts toward our children's mental health and well-being, and whereas Tennessee Voices for Children, through its unique approach to serving children and adolescents, is effectively caring for the mental health needs of children, youth, young adults, and families in our community. Now therefore, I, Todd Fowler, Mayor of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, do hereby proclaim May 9th, 2024 as Children's Mental Health Acceptance Day in Johnson City, Tennessee, and urge all agencies and organizations interested in meeting every child's mental health need to unite on that day in the observance of such exercises as will acquaint the people of Johnson City with the fundamental necessity of a year-round program for children, youth, and young adults with mental health needs and their families. So, thank you all. Appreciate it. And I'll let you talk about what we're doing for that day and the week.
Okay, we, Tennessee Voices serves youth across Tennessee. We develop care plans and crisis plans, and we partner with their support, so whether that be therapists, anybody outside the home, their closest supporters, family, friends. And we also, during Children's Mental Health Week, which is May 6th through the 11th, we spread the word by doing different activities. It could be just getting, like, there's one project where we're getting green drinks. It's in West Tennessee to support children's mental health. Different businesses are doing different things, and they will have signs that we help print out, and they hang them up, and just saying that they support children's mental health across the state. So we're very pleased that you all recognize children's mental health as acceptance. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it
you.
very much. So I'm also going to introduce you to a group of young people that came to City Hall today to learn a lot about the city functions. There's a group from Science Hill. They were participated in the Gov All Out thing we had today. So if y'all will come forward, we'll let you come stand up here, and we're going to get a picture of y'all with the commission.
Mayor, if you want to have Keisha speak a little bit about what they did.
Keisha, you want to come up and say a little bit about what they did?
Thank you so much. Gov All Out is a government awareness and education day that we hold every year for our Science Hill students. Jessica Connor is a government teacher at Science Hill, and she selects that group to come, and they spend the day with us learning about different city services. They spend time with our commission and city manager. We do a budget exercise where we find a surprise $1 million extra in the budget, and they break into groups and tell us how they would spend that money.
That doesn't ever actually happen.
One of them said, "Is this real?"
No.
But they're brilliant. They come up with the most brilliant ideas and questions, and we're so lucky to have these really bright young people here, and we hope that they will always be a part of our community and stay engaged with us. Would you all like to say anything about your experience today? Anyone?
Yes.
I'd just like to say thank you. I initially knew nothing about this Johnson City's government and how it functions, and just how impactful it is on a local scale. Like, you see all these big events in the world, and you think how impactful they are, and then you compare them to the stuff that's enacted by our commissioners and our mayor, and it's really like eye-opening how effective they are. I'm also grateful for being selected with these talented individuals to come forth and learn about the government, and it was a really eye-opening experience, and I'm really appreciative.
How many students participated in total, Keisha?
21 juniors and seniors, and we just appreciate everything that you gave to us today and your all's time with the group. This was actually the impetus for our new Johnson City Junior Council, because we recognized that the commission really valued the input of our young people, and we needed more than one day a year with this small group where we could gain some of that. So we're just grateful for the program and everything you all do to bring it to us, Ms. Connor.
And I'm just noticing Miss Connor's earrings, and I feel like they need a nod. She's got her Johnson City earrings on.
Today.
All right. Well, so, okay, I missed it.
If y'all will scoot to the middle, we'll stand up behind you and we'll get a picture. I think JT's ready to go back there.
Let's do it again. I think my eyes were closed. Just kidding.
All right, thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioners, the next order of business is consideration of the consent agenda.
All right, I start with my left today, Commissioner Hunter.
Thank you,
I'm going to pull 6.1.2. I realize it's just a shifting of some funds, but reduction of crime has been one of our top priorities, and maybe there's just a little bit of update on how we're going to use this money.
Commissioner Wise?
I don't have anything else.
Vice Mayor?
No, sir.
All right, just 6.1.2.
So I think we have Major Carrier here to address this issue, and the item 6.1.2 is to consider approval of the proposed amendment to the Violent Crime Intervention Fund grant to be moved unused funds from FY '24 to '25.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Evening.
What has basically happened is there was some funding in the FY '24 capital that we could use that we've not been able to utilize yet because we're waiting on TDOT to get some licensing fees and stuff to us. So we're asking to extend that into the FY '25 budget for next year. And then also some overtime monies that we were not able to expend because of some staffing issues. And so we're just wanting to roll that over into FY '25 as well then.
I was just wondering, what kind of objectives would be set for this kind of money?
Right, yes. And so what we're trying to do is we use it to hire off-duty officers to go and work extra duty details and to focus on certain areas where we're having problems with crime, and so that we can use our crime mapping data that helps us with that. And so then they go out and they engage. And we saw good results of this in the past that we've been able to track through several arrests that we've made, guns and things that we've been able to take off the streets then. So, and we're wanting to keep this going. It's just unfortunate we've had to slow down just a little bit because of our staffing, but we ultimately we want to expend all the monies that we've been given towards that and help to make Johnson City a safer place then.
That's a good answer.
Thank you.
That's sort of surprising.
So, I hope, did that answer your
It did.
question, Matt?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Major.
Okay.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion about the consent agenda? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
The next order of business is consideration of ordinances under first reading. The first one is item 7.1. This is ordinance number 4880-24, and this is an ordinance to change the property tax due rate, allowing partial payments of property taxes and change delinquency date. And I will just add, we have our finance director to answer any questions that you might have about this. We had a request come before. The commission requested that we look at allowing these partial payments so that our citizens could be able to make them in incremental amounts. We also had a request to align our due date with the county's due date so that it wouldn't be confusing. And this kind of falls under our efficiency in local government area of governance.
I would move approval, and I guess say in that move and in this movement, we are doing something that's consistent. For those here, we're asking for a charter amendment relative to how we do budgets and how we do readings on ordinances. We've done a number of things relative to how we've adopted the International Building Code to be consistent with other communities in the area. And so what this is really doing is making your city tax bill and how you pay it and when you pay it line up with your county tax bill and how you pay it and when you pay it. And so as to minimize as many unnecessary variables that are out there that I think just end up being unhelpful to citizens and residents and stakeholders. So I think this just streamlines things for people. It just makes sense.
Yeah, I'd like to second that, but with a question to Ms. Lyles, could you just kind of go through the particular dates?
Okay.
And then how our citizens can, take advantage of this?
So the charter originally has the due date for our taxes as September 1st. We don't get our tax bills out until after September 1st because we have to wait for the tax rolls to come from the state. So that's changing the original due date to October 1st. The second thing it's doing is changing the delinquency date, which is currently January 1st. So if your taxes are not paid by December 31st, you get interest accrued as of January 1st. We're moving that to the delinquency date will be March 1st. So your taxes will be due February 28th, and they won't start accruing interest and being delinquent until March 1st. The biggest piece of this is the allowance of partial payments. Currently, we're not allowed to accept a partial payment of your taxes. We had to get permission from the comptroller's office to be allowed to do this, and then we had to do the ordinance to get the commission's permission to do it. This will allow you to, as soon as your bill comes out, you can start making payments. You don't have to come and pay your bill all at once in one foul swoop. You can come in and make, I believe we've set the minimum payment at $50 and one payment a month, but you can come in and make payments on it, so you don't have to have that huge hit all at one time. So it'll also help you out with anybody who pays and it gets here right at the end of the delinquency day or the end of the due date. We won't have to send payments back like we have in the past. So
Would you be able to pay online?
you can still pay online, and you will be allowed to make partial payments online. Mhm.
So I did second.
Yes. Any further discussion? All right, Ms. Lyles.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Next item is item 7.2, ordinance 4881-24. This is an ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee by changing from I-1 district, R2 district, R5 district to R4 district for property located at 0 Princeton Road. We have Bryce McNamer here with the Planning Department. Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you. And good evening, everybody. The request for this rezoning, the proposal, I guess, is to rezone 2.7 acres from I-1, R2, and R5 to R4 to accommodate a development of townhomes. First, we'll look at the surrounding zoning. As I mentioned, and as we can see outlined here, in the black outline here is the subject site. You can see the northern side here is I-1 light industrial. This bottom corner here is R2 low-density residential, and this corner here with the frontage on Princeton Road is R5 high-density residential. Now, the I-1 industrial part extends up past Silverdale and farther up on Princeton Road here. The R2 portion is just the corner of a large block of single-family homes down in here, and then the MS1 Medical Services District is on the other side of the Princeton frontage and also bleeds into a little bit onto this side as well. We also have this R5 look-alike down here, as well as a planned residential development here. Looking at the land use side of things, this lot is vacant. It has been historically vacant since the adoption of the code. We can see the commercial industrial use here. Like I said, medical use is over here, residential use is over here, and we can even see that while zoned medical services here, 2 out of these 3 lots are used for residential, the other of which is commercial. However, it is non-operable from what I've been able to find. We'll move on here to the future land use. Future land use map also splits this site 3 ways. The industrial just nipping a little corner here. The residential, taking up this half, right where the R2 portion would be. And then we have a commercial use here. And if we zoom out, this commercial kind of comes down where we see 26 in the bottom corner and the large arterial business district that is around I-26, kind of come up here and form a leg and a little foot off of here and form this sort of buffer. There is currently no commercial development within this red leg shape here. So as staff feels that a commercial development would probably not be appropriate given the residential character of this entire neighborhood. We do take into account the formation of this transitional zone or buffer that fronts the collector road of Princeton Road here with the lower density housing behind it. As I mentioned earlier, this lot has been historically vacant and has been vacant since the adoption of the code in 1972. I felt it necessary, and staff felt it necessary, to go back and look exactly how we got to this point, and with a split three ways, and what this frontage exactly looks like and was intended to be. With the adoption of the code in 1972, this entire frontage was R5. As we could see, this is where the R5 on the current lot is, and it actually extended down to Cressinger here. The first case I'll look, these are all going to be planning commission cases. The first planning commission meeting was on June 9th, 1981, request 183. This request was to take some of the R5 along this Princeton frontage and a bit of this R2 on the back part here and change it to B4, as we would see here, as I mentioned, along I-26.
Bryce, for the benefit of the public, could you just give a few word description about R5?
R5 is a high-density residential, and it's typically more like apartments or condos or anything higher. It's the second highest density allowed. Moving back to request 183, the request was to zone most of this portion, take it from R5 and move it to B4. However, Planning Commission denied this request, stating that the B4 would be an inappropriate buffer, given the mostly residential character of this area. Moving and therefore ruling in favor of keeping the R5 higher density residential there.
B4 is business related.
B4 is the arterial business, typically what you see on like State of Franklin or Market or something. Moving to rezoning request 310, heard by the Planning Commission on November 10th of 1987. This took a very similar area of interest here with the R5 still existing and changing it to R01. In 1987, this is predating our MS1 Medical Services District, and R01 was serving as office and medical before they split off and further designated a district for a medical service. So this request was to take the R01 and what we would see as MS1 district now, extend it across Princeton to take up most of this frontage here. Once again, the Planning Commission denied this request, concerning that an R01 allowing more commercial uses and already the abundance of R01 within this, that the R01 needs to stay on this side of Princeton and this side should stay residential. Also concerning that these uses would be directly abutting R2 property and single-family uses here, therefore denying that in favor of the higher density residential once again. Last request I'll look at is another one from 1981 on July 14th, Planning Commission meeting. This kind of does the opposite of what we saw earlier, where we were taking B4 and moving it here, or we were taking R01 and moving it here. This is kind of mirrored in where the request was to take R2 that was behind the R5 and overlap that R5 and take R2 lower density residential up to the Princeton frontage and also as well down here as well. Once again, this was denied by the Planning Commission, stating that a transitional zone or some sort of buffer land use would be needed to protect the R2 single family housing development here from more impactful uses in the R01 as well as the higher traffic road of Princeton here, specifically recommending R5 in this case, as it was already R5. Moving away from requests here, this was the very first map that could be found. This essentially created what is now seen here as R2. This was the first subdivision on Nave. We can see it was taken a bit off, and this essentially formed what we see today as the lot. Moving away from some of the background, we'll go to the current conditions of the subject site. There's a gradual slope from the eastern property line downwards towards Princeton, as we can see on the contours map here, where we see this is a heavily wooded, and it essentially creates its own buffer to the storage facility, industrial, and commercial use up here, as well as being wooded and creating some sort of buffer alongside the Princeton frontage and the collector road here. There's also an existing stream, as heard in public comment, that runs here and runs under and then kind of runs up alongside Princeton and then crosses over right about the corner of the lot here. Getting to the actual concept plan, the proposed zoning is R4, which would permit 14 units per acre. For this specific site being 2.7 acres, this would permit a maximum of 37.8 units. However, with the existence of some environmental and vegetation over here, this concept plan depicts 4 structures totaling to 24 units. If this were to be approved, this would be binding, and this concept plan would bind this development to 24 units. It would not be able to construct any more without an amendment to the concept plan, therefore requiring more commission decisions and considerations on top of that. The entryway is on the south side of the property on Nave Drive here, so right just past where the creek buffer is. As far as parking goes, there is 1 garage and 1 driveway space per unit. This alone would meet the 2 parking spaces requirement per unit for the multifamily development. However, after consideration and speaking with the project engineer, we felt it would be helpful to have some parking spaces that are not directly tied to each unit for miscellaneous uses such as delivery vehicles, maintenance vehicles, or just visitors in general. So then, on top of the already met parking requirement per zoning code, 11 additional spaces were added. As we can see, a few here, here, and then a couple down here. There will be a new sidewalk along the Nave Drive frontage. 5-foot sidewalk will extend from the property line and extend along Nave Drive and connect to the existing sidewalk that runs along this side of Princeton Road. There will be a type 1 buffer yard, which will be 15 foot in width with 10 type evergreen trees per 100 feet. This is about 170, so it'd be a little bit more than 10 trees. This will be 15 foot in width. This is required based on the fact that it directly adjoins an R2, lower impactful use. And that's where that buffer yard is required. And then this buffer actually extends down into where it's not directly required. However, to further protect adjoining neighbors and where units are closest to the road. That will also suffice the landscape yard, which will be 10 feet on all frontages. It will need to be landscaped. There will be a new stormwater pond. As I mentioned earlier, this site slopes from this property line down towards Princeton, and due to the impervious area being increased due to new pavement and structures, new runoff will run, stormwater runoff will go this way and run into the stormwater retention pond here. There'll also be a 30-foot buffer on each side of the existing stream in order to not disturb any environmental resources within this development. Lastly, there will be a screened dumpster back here and a mail kiosk right here to keep these sort of activities within the site. As far as utilities go, water and sewer are available and have been determined adequate for the development. We also have a fire hydrant right here. Traffic analysis was done to assess the development's impact on the surrounding streets. No unreasonable impacts were found. Anthony Todd with Traffic is here to answer further questions on this topic. For schools, there is a bus stop located on the corner of Princeton and Nave, and this can be utilized if needed for any school-aged children that would be residing in this development. After speaking with the Director of Transit, this would be adequate. This development will not cause any capacity issues at Fairmont Elementary or Indian Trail Middle School, after speaking with the Superintendent of Johnson City Schools. I'll move on to some of the citizen comments. This slide is an attempt at being comprehensive of all comments we've come with. As we can see, the neighborhood meeting was held April 3rd. We had 27 attendees, most of which also attended the April 9th Planning Commission meeting. I've also spoke with many of them on the phone, through email, or in person. Reading letters, trying to gain a better perspective from the neighbors on what this development looks like and what the concerns may be. I'd say, first of all, the first two bullet points realistically go together, the entrance location being on Nave Drive, not Princeton Road. Project engineer and creator of the concept plan, Todd Wood, is here. He can tell you a little bit more specifically about the complications of an alternative entrance being located on Princeton Road and having to cross the creek, dealing with an ARAP permit. Increased traffic, obviously, and the legitimacy of the traffic and analysis that was done. Specifically with possible congestion at the intersection of Princeton and Nave right outside of this development, and using Nave Drive down through Kipping Street over to East Mount Castle Drive, using the entire neighborhood as a cut through, which seems like is already being used as a cut through, and this would only further impact that. As well as traffic posing a risk to pedestrian safety within the neighborhood. Another concern is parking. There not being enough spaces. The concept plan was frequently acted on. As we heard, we did update that a lot and even added more spaces after the neighborhood meeting, after hearing some feedback on the parking. And going into not enough spaces, possibly overflowing onto Nave Drive, causing the residential road to even be more impacted. Anthony Todd is here. He can talk about the possibility of posting no parking out there. However, there was another concern with the number of units and whether a fire truck would be able to access in an event of an emergency. Lori Ratliff with Fire Department has reviewed and approved this current concept plan per regulations. We've received questions about what are the prices of these units and how will this affect the property values. In our scope, we are looking at rezoning, and is this an appropriate use of the land right now? So we do not quite have that information as of yet. What does the operation of the actual development look like? Is this going to be rented, whether it be short or long term, or will these be sold, or will these be Section 8 apartments? After speaking with the developer, they do plan on selling these individually, so they will be owner occupied, as well as having an HOA to oversee the residences within this neighborhood. Also had some confusion about the International Building Code R4 section, which has a little bit different look. The International Building Code does not apply to where things are built. It sets occupancy classifications onto how structures are built based on occupants. Concerns with the effect on the character of the surrounding neighborhood, increased crime, noise, and lighting. Can we restrict certain buyers, or are these going to be based to a specific population? And as we heard, a concern with the amount of green space in this plan. Trash, as we heard, on the northern side of the property, the dry creek, the possibility of that flooding where the dumpster is located on the northern side. This would be further evaluated by the Public Works Department and site plan processes. as well as proper screening. The dumpster will be screened to zoning code standards, and they have proposed a gate on the front to deter dumpster diving. The existing stream running underneath Nave and then up in that wooded area along Princeton, the culvert under Nave not being of adequate size and posing a flood risk. Once again, this will be reviewed further in the site plan process with Public Works. Schools I talked about on the previous slide with the bus stops and the capacity. Questions about the construction and the noise of when these actually would be getting built. We do not have any information as we're just evaluating the actual use of the land, not the actual building portion yet, so we do not have information on the exterior materials or what the proposed appearance of these structures would look like, or the heating and cooling methods. As mentioned before, Water Sewer has deemed this development and the utilities surrounding it adequate. Should be no issues with surrounding properties' water pressure. And I believe it's a fair point to say that there's been a general level of distrust for the developer and their ability to construct this and maintain this in a likable manner, as well as distaste for the planning department's notification procedure for letters, which is rezoning 200-foot range for letters to go to adjoining citizens. This is a state statute that we follow the exact same for every rezoning, and the moment that we start varying from that is the moment that we run into problems with favoring other developments. With all of that being said, the staff would recommend approval of the proposed rezoning based on the following rationale. The rezoning will resolve the current split zone condition of the lot. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we have industrial and 2 levels of residential. Industrial and residential do not work together at all. We need, and I believe it's an overarching goal of staff, is to find conformity with zoning within a lot. The rezoning would not have an unreasonable impact on the surrounding community, as the development of townhomes retains the residential character of Nave Drive. As we've seen in previous ones, we're changing the whole use. This, we're realistically just changing the level of density slightly. The proposal maximizes the use of the land in an appropriate manner without disturbing the existing stream or vegetation towards the Princeton side of the lot. The R4 district would provide a transitional zone between the MS1 west of Princeton and the R2 to the east. There are currently high-density residential developments along Princeton and in the surrounding area. Rezoning requests to eliminate higher density residential along Princeton Road have been denied by the Planning Commission in the past on the basis that commercial and low-density residential uses would be inappropriate, as we saw in those 3 cases I've shown you. Every single time this has come for a request, it has been ruled in favor of higher density residential, where that would be R5 in that specific scenario. Lastly, I'd just like to zoom out to look at the neighborhood from afar. Once again, here's our site proposed to become R4. We kind of reflect what we see in the 30-unit apartment development here, which is R5, as well as the higher density residential planned here, creating this buffer, and would mirror what we see on West Lakeview Drive, where we have Collector Road, higher density residential, interior lower density residential single-family homes. Just like this, we have a higher use, Collector Road, higher density residential use, interior lower density residential single-family homes. I'll go to that pretty picture drawn by the engineer here. That's all I have for you.
Can you talk a little bit about the change? One of the notes was that one plan had shown 34, and now we're talking about 24. And
right.
How that came to be, and just confirming this is binding, which means how much of a change from this invokes the need how binding is binding? Like, how much of a
Okay.
tweak can happen
Gotcha.
within?
So concerning the 34 units, that was sent out far earlier. That was the very first concept plan. After that, we have to send the notifications out a bit farther of a distance. And then we start going through reviews. And in this case, we did have a lot of minor changes and resubmissions and working back and forth with the engineer, other departments, with the city to try to reach a common ground. Also hearing comments over the phone and through email from the citizens, I tried to pass those on to the engineer who would be working on and trying to address some of these within a new concept plan. And I believe we are on number 4 now. So 34 was vastly different than where we got through 2, 3, and 4.
And that's typical as we work these projects.
Yeah, it does work pretty quick, yes. As far as amending the concept plan, movement of ingress and egress, if this were to move over here, and this is a new entryway, that would need a concept plan amendment. Adding units, as I said, just be bound to 24 as of right now. If they take 1 or 2 off, that wouldn't be a concept plan amendment because it wouldn't be overly impacting what is already present. But adding units or adding new structures, that would constitute another concept plan amendment, or just a major change determined by staff that would need to go back and get reapproval, such as taking the pond and flipping it over and flipping everything or mirroring everything.
So like if you move the placement of the driveways within the complex, that's enough of a change to be a change to a binding site plan?
I guess it could be a gray area, and how you want to say if, like, maybe this was shifted.
Well, I
If
mean,
this-
like, look at the two that are parallel, perpendicular to the detention basin. If you
Mhm.
decided to move that driveway closer to the industrial property and put those 2 rows, you know, have the road on either side and have the 2 roads facing just across green space, would that be enough to change the binding site plan?
So are you saying taking this road and putting it up here?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how much of it, how binding is binding.
I would say an entire new street would constitute, but planning director Will Ryder could go along.
I'm just going to read this straight out of the code on what would constitute a significant change. A significant amendment to approved concept is determined by staff, change in use, an increase in intensity or density, substantial change in building location, ingress and egress, open space, or other changes that could negatively impact the surrounding properties. I wouldn't think that tweaking the internal drive aisles within the proposed development would warrant a substantial change unless it perhaps came this way and down the property line and joined a single-family residence. I think that would be something that could be tweaked. But certainly moving, and maybe changing the ingress if it went 10 feet this way or 10 feet that way. Obviously, it can't go too far this way because of the creek. I wouldn't consider that substantial, but if it came down, like Bryce pointed out, and it was on the neighboring property line, then that would be significant. Or moving it all the way over to Princeton Road.
And did somebody say Anthony Todd was here?
Yes, sir.
No, he's behind the curtain. Before you leave, Mr. Ryder, if this was R3 instead, could you tell me about what the density, how many homes, how many apartments, whatever?
It would
could
be
fit there?
7 units per acre for R3, so.
It'd be about 14, 17?
2.7, so.
18,
north
somewhere
of
in there.
15, somewhere in there.
Okay.
So as traffic goes, you've got one way in and out in this plan on Nave, and there's been some comment made about moving that on to Princeton. What would the ramifications be? I know sometimes when you've got 2 or 3 lanes coming out in real close succession like that, it's actually worse, because you're watching the traffic, but then you're also having to watch all the other side streets. From a traffic standpoint, what happens when you move that entrance toward Princeton?
If you move the entrance onto Princeton.
Yeah, and forget all the stormwater stuff, I'm just curious about the traffic.
Yeah, we prefer it to be residential to access a residential street. And so that one residential street would access Princeton, because more access points on a collector or arterial creates more confusion for the driver, more things that they have to watch for, therefore usually results in more accidents.
I have another question for you while you're here.
Sure.
If there is overflow parking and you can't park on the street, where do you think these people are going to park if there isn't room for them to park inside this development?
Well, if they do park on the street, then we have the ability to go back in there and post that no parking. So we try not to do that, because it affects everyone.
Mhm.
So if someone has a Christmas party or something like that, that happens once or twice a year, we prefer
Once a
not
year,
to
actually,
take
for
them
Christmas party,
and make
but-
them an illegal parker.
Yeah.
So that if it becomes an ongoing problem, we will definitely go out there and post a no parking.
So if you post it, where do you think they'll move to go park?
They would move further up into the neighborhood, probably.
Mr. Todd, did you do any kind of traffic estimates about how many additional daily trips in and out of that would bring to Nave Avenue?
There was a traffic study done by Mattern and Craig. And so what we normally look at is the AM and PM peak hours, because if you can solve the issues with the AM and PM peak, then you're not going to have a problem with the other times of the day. So
Excuse me,
we
Mr. Todd.
focused-
Excuse me, Mr. Todd.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
can you pull the microphone down? I was
Sure,
going to ask you to
sorry
do
about that. So if we solve the problems during the AM and PM peak hours of the day, then we can solve the problems through the rest of the day. So the focus is on how many are generated during the AM and PM peak. And so in the AM peak, there's approximately 12 vehicles that would be accessing, would be on Nave, so going in and out of their driveway, with 9 of those exiting and 3 entering. And during the PM peak, we're looking at a total of 16, where 10 are coming and 6 are going. So those are the times that we're most interested in. And so they also did an analysis of what the queuing would be, and the queuing does not reach an unacceptable level. The most that we saw queuing would be around, at the most, around 4 or 5 cars. And that's not to say that there's not going to be times that it's going to exceed that. Obviously, from day to day, one day you may have 1 or 2, and the next day you may have 5 or 6. But those would be the 95th percentile expectation of how many vehicles there would be there. And also, they did a level of service analysis of the intersection, and it was found to be acceptable on the level of service currently and in the future with these added on.
There's a turning lane on Princeton, right, in the center?
There's a center turn lane. I believe it comes into this area, stops a little bit past this. No, this is actually the 4-lane section, so the turn lane doesn't start until you get down, I think, around maybe the dentist office in that area.
So the stacking that you're talking about, you said probably not more than 4, but there will be 12 auto trips, I guess, going to work in the morning.
Correct.
Does that include the vehicles already in the neighborhood, or is that just
It
talking
does.
about the new ones?
So the existing traffic is also taken into account and is added into these numbers.
About how many cars can back up before they get in front of the driveway into this new
It is
development?
approximately 150 feet, I believe, so
So you get-
that takes you, it's about 20 to 25 feet per car
Yeah.
is usually the typical stack.
So 5 before you get to the front?
It'd be more than that.
Maybe 6?
Yeah.
How wide are those driveways in this plan? Like the road, do you know in this plan?
How are the driveways arranged?
How wide are the driveways through this development? 24 feet. So people are going to park on the side of these driveways, I would assume. I mean, if you're short on parking, you're not going to go park on Nave and walk into this development. You're going to park somewhere even less, even more congested. I mean, 24 feet is wider than Cedar Rock Village. They try to park on the street in there.
Did I understand there'll be 2 parking spaces per unit plus an additional 11 spaces in there?
Yeah, so one of which would be the garage spot, the other of which would be the driveway itself.
So these townhomes will have garages?
Yes.
Drive under?
Yep. So you can park in here, park on the driveway, and that, like I said, that alone meets the parking requirements of 2 per unit.
Until people use their garage as a storage unit.
I have a question.
Which
We
I've
don't
heard.
have, I don't have regulations on
Nobody
storage.
does that.
I have a question. Does the concept plan bind them to just the number of units or the details of a garage spot? Because from what I understand, they can decide not to do garages, and there goes a parking spot.
Well, they'd have to come up with 24 more
Yeah,
parking spots.
I would,
Or 12 more, anyway.
I would think they would, if,
Because there's no
if they
room.
lose 24 parking spots, I would find it very hard for them to generate 24 spots.
Because this
elsewhere.
concept plan doesn't bind them to a garage spot. Correct?
Ladies and gentlemen, Will Ryder.
If the, as Bryce stated, if they did not build the garages, then when we were reviewing the building plans or either the civil plans or the building plans, and we see that there's no garage, they're not meeting their parking requirement. Then they would be hard pressed on this particular site, I think, to come up with 24 more parking spaces. If they had to come up with 24 more parking spaces, they would probably have to find a place to build a parking lot on this, which I think is unlikely, and therefore, but if they did, it would have to come back for a concept plan amendment.
And then a parking lot like that would have pretty significant stormwater implications, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So you'd be trying to find somewhere for 24 more spots, and then you'd have to find somewhere for all the runoff to go.
That's correct.
Well, can we back up to the slide right before this one? First, I want to really say thank you to Bryce for going back and looking at the history of this property. Some of us were around when it first started, for sure.
Only some, Jenny.
Whoa.
It's trouble. It's trouble.
But just the concept, the question I'm getting ready to ask. In between this property and the folks across the street who were here, it's MS1. What can be built there without any rezoning, without anything, that they can just come and get a building permit?
In the MS1 district, you could build medical service clinics, some commercial uses. And I get, you're talking about the one, if you would allow me, I'll just move back. We're talking about
I think there's a better
across
slide.
this way.
Yes.
Okay, and not MS1
I think if you
district.
go back a little further, there's a better one.
Right here. Well, and this is zoned MS1, correct, Bryce? And so there are 2 single-family houses, so if the single-family houses were demolished, then you could build a medical clinic, medical commercial type uses, medical supply stores, that sort of thing.
But there's
So-
don't beauty shops and barber shop, there's other stuff.
Personal services,
Right,
professional
like,
services.
and they could do that in that house. I mean,
That's correct. And, but plus, they would have to come up with, they would have to have a site plan and do, meet parking requirements and buffer requirements and stormwater ponds and those sorts of things, which might be quite a bit more intrusive.
if they
than-
started to build, or if they even changed to a
If they
MS
had,
use.
if they changed to an MS use, and if they had to disturb the impervious area and build, construct parking and that sort of thing, then it could trigger stormwater.
But basically, they wouldn't come for us to, if they did want to rezone, they wanted to build something that was qualified in MS1, they could just get a permit and go ahead as long as they met all the engineering requirements.
That's correct.
So can we go to the property in question now, the one that has the 3 different zonings? And I don't know when this property changed hands, were those 3 parcels purchased separately and then they're trying to combine them now? But the upper part of it is I-1.
That's
right there.
correct.
What can be built there just with coming and getting the permit?
Factories, which would be difficult because of the size of it, but it's possible that an argument could be made if someone, if this fell through and someone wanted to come in subsequently and propose an industrial use, they would have a fairly good argument to rezone it to industrial, I think, because half of the lot is industrial. Warehouses.
It's adjacent to industrial.
Warehouses, mini storage, I think that those two would be, you would be able to do that on this amount of industrial property without having to rezone the property. And of course, this part right here that's zoned R5 is pretty much undevelopable because of the stream. But the warehouses, mini warehouses, any sort of industrial use that doesn't produce noxious fumes or noises as governed by the city's noise ordinance. Realistically, I think you very well could get a storage building. But like I said, if there was a proposal to do something a little more intense along the industrial lines, I think there would be a fairly good argument to rezone that entire lot industrial,
Now,
which would be.
On the R2, there are other things that can be built on R2 besides a single-family home, is that correct?
You could put in cemeteries. There's a.
How many car trips does that generate?
There's a whole lot of
I'm not
people,
sure-
a
I'm
whole
not
lot
sure
of people
what
gonna
the-
be living
I'm
there.
sure the
Well, not
state-
living there, but being there.
The state
Neighbors will be
probably
quiet.
has regulations
Be
on
quiet.
density on
Quiet
those types
neighbors.
of things, but,
Can you not do like group homes and things like that?
through the BZA with some very tight restrictions on that. But as bright, just bringing up the past planning commissions, there was, after one of the failed rezoning attempts, the neighborhood petitioned staff to have this entire thing rezoned to R2 all the way to Princeton Road, and the planning commission deemed that inappropriate as well, which is, commercial has failed. Years ago. Commercial's failed, R2 has failed. There seems to be a commonality with all the rezoning attempts to come up with some sort of multifamily density, which the R5 already exists on this. We felt like it was natural if it's already partially zoned multifamily, that alone is already suitable for that lot. But R4 is less intense than R5, and R4 accomplishes what they would like to do. So we talked, decided that would be the most appropriate zone.
Can you point out where this swampy area is that's non-buildable? Is it all in the R5?
Basically
The whole
right
R5?
here. I think this is a pretty good picture because you can see it side by side. So here's the R5 and the I-1, and it's, the creek runs
Right there. yeah.
right here and across, and then you have to have 30 feet of vegetation either way. So basically this wooded area, I think you could put something, you could get a warehouse of some sort back here in this area probably. And then the other thing is yes, the R4 does permit 36 units. Yes, concept plans can be amended, but since half of this lot is almost undevelopable, that would seem very unlikely that an increase in units could occur.
And I asked you about R3 earlier. R2, how many could be on that 2 point?
R2 is simply 15,000 square foot lots, one house per lot. So 2.7 acres for, how many lots can you get on 2.7 acres?
Probably like 7?
Yeah.
No, isn't it 4,500, 45,000 to an acre?
It's 15,000 square feet,
Right.
15,000 square foot lot. So,
I didn't bring my
I
calculator.
need a calculator.
Yeah.
I could figure this out.
How many
I could
square
come back
feet
to
are in
the
an
podium
acre,
and tell you
Mr.
how
Wood?
many lots that you could put on that.
Okay, so it's about 3 per acre,
So we'd have about 7.
little, plus or
Somewhere.
minus, it'd be 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was a pretty good guess.
Mr. Ryder, I guess in my mind, sometimes less is more and more is less, and I actually kind of have some concerns about adding more parking, because that promotes more vehicles, toys, boats, and whatnot that are going to be stationary and cluttered. I know there's going to be an HOA, but in your opinion, I truly don't know. Do you think that adding more parking is actually a good idea or a worse idea as far as?
Having been involved with code enforcement for quite a few years, I understand the concern with what that could do as far as having abandoned vehicles and exterior storage and that sort of thing. 11 parking spaces, I think, is reasonable. I would think that would be reasonable. If there are issues where, and of course, code enforcement is generally complaint-driven, and if there are abandoned vehicles, I would suspect, one, there will be a homeowners association, and the HOAs do a pretty good job usually of policing up that sort of thing. But residents and people that would be living there, people that are living in the neighborhoods now, I'm sure they would probably be quick to inform code enforcement if that sort of blight happened, and we do have codes that allow us to tow vehicles. And the other thing that HOAs don't like is if you have this sort of condition on the property and it's controlled by an HOA, the HOA is actually the one that receives the code enforcement complaint, and they're usually pretty responsive on cleaning those sorts of things up. I think it's a great point, valid concern, but I don't think that 11 is a great many, and there are existing codes that could keep it from becoming an outdoor storage lot, basically. Yes, sir.
Did we say earlier that the engineer is here for the?
Yes, sir.
Can we speak with him for a minute?
Yes, sir.
Since the developer doesn't seem to be here, can you answer like material questions on what the plan is?
The developer here as well.
Okay, all right, very good.
Actually, Todd Wood, 1804 Galen Drive, Johnson City. Sure. What type of questions?
Materials for what you'd be building this out of?
They have looked at some plans. We've given the city kind of an elevation of what it might look like. They don't know for sure. I'm hesitant about saying that in a meeting like this because you can get into some legal issues in talking about materials and rezonings. I will say that they plan to sell these. They did have an appraisal done for 3-bedroom, 2-story townhome units under current market conditions, and it was about $268,000. That was one of the questions that the neighborhood had asked, so the developer did that. That's not to say that's what it's going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, but under current market conditions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions from anyone?
I guess one of the things to follow up with my questions a few minutes ago about what could be built right now. To the residents, and we absolutely hear everything that you're saying. What the number of units winds up being, I don't know. But one of the things you can do is lock in a permanent development of this property that is residential, that is much more compatible with where you live. The units may look different. I know that we are always challenged, as everybody says, there's not going to be many more R2s inside the city limits of Johnson City with the large lots like we used to have. But you can lock it in and then you know exactly what you're going to have. You're not having to deal with this anymore. So, I don't know, we've asked these questions about traffic, about parking, about getting out on Princeton Road, how much more confusion is going to be there, the safety aspects, the fact that there's no sidewalks up and down Nave Drive. And Nave has been a cut-through forever, you know, that people use Nave to cut through Woodland Mountain, so there's no denying or anything on that. But those are just some things that need to be thought of, that if this project doesn't go through, then you may wind up with something else there that you really don't want. And because it's already zoned that, they don't have to come and get permission for it. They just go ahead and do it. And, you know, I'm not saying this thing to take a side one way or another. It's just the reality of the way, you know, development occurs and the way zonings occur. So, just a
Okay.
comment.
Yeah, and I think I live relatively close. I just live on the other side of Mount Castle. I drive around this immediate area a great deal. I live in a neighborhood that's a cut-through, so I feel your pain. In fact, some of your kids probably drive through my neighborhood to get to Science Hill. What I would observe as I've looked at this property, and I've looked at that neighborhood, and I've looked at that density of residential, it reminds me of Town Acres and the condominiums I once lived in at Sunset and Sundale. And so that's R4, those condos that are right there at the corner. Just a stone's throw behind them, you're into R2. Now, I will tell you, in the 3 or 4 years that my wife and I lived in those condos, I don't think I ever cut through Town Acres. You know, I pulled out onto Sundale and I was aiming toward Sunset. I would echo what Commissioner Brock said, in that, in one sense, there is some value in knowing what you have, and if you can shape what the project ends up looking like, that can be very beneficial. I personally would much rather see a multifamily residential there than an MS1 use or the B4 type uses. I would rather kind of see it gradually transition out to Princeton. You know, I want you to understand, like, we see you as people, we see you as our neighbors, and I really couldn't care less about the tax revenue that this is going to generate. My primary concern right now is we're 2,700 housing units short of the need that exists in our community. Part of that is a product, nothing anybody here has done, but for 10 or 12 years, we really didn't do any real meaningful development in the area. And so now we're in this kind of catch-22 of having this pent-up demand. This is infill development. If we can get that industrial zone out of your backyards, I think you're ahead for it. Is it a perfect plan? I don't know. Again, we're not being asked about 24 apartments. I mean, it's a binding site plan. We're being asked about land use. And so what we're being asked is, does it make more sense to be medical services or residential? Does it make more sense to be industrial or residential? And so the lane we're trying to find is the place that makes the most sense and does the least harm. And so, you know, this is just the first reading, but I want you to know it was heard, and I have concerns about garages counting. I understand where they come from, but I've seen lots of garages get used as storage unit. I mean, I see lots of areas where that can be a challenge. The 24-foot driveways are encouraging because I've seen neighborhoods that have the driveways narrower than that. But really, that's all I wanted to say.
All right, any more discussion? Is there a motion?
Well, I will go ahead and make a motion on first reading to be able to move this to second reading. I would do this with hearing this discussion tonight and to work with the developer more to see if there are some alterations to this project. We, you know, the elements of having an HOA and the concept plan certainly looks to be a very well quality, you know, project. I mean, it's all I can say from looking at this. But it will have 2 more readings and we have to get there. So it's been kind of quiet up here, and I think y'all can see that, you know, we are listening, but I will make a motion to move it on to second reading and for additional study of this project.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, motion and a second. Any discussion?
I guess I would just say to the neighbors, I would interact with the petitioner, because there are ways in which a plan, you know, can be modified that might minimize the impact or might aesthetically blend into the neighborhood. You know, I don't look at the condos I alluded to on Sunset and think they're out of place with town acres. And I think this project doesn't have to be out of place. I think it's just a matter of arriving at that in a kind of collaborative way. So.
Yes. Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
No.
Mayor Fowler?
And with the parking concerns, sidewalk concerns, flooding concerns, safety kind of issues for me, I'm going to vote no also.
The next item, Commission, for your consideration is ordinance number 4882-24. This is an ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City by changing from R2 district to RP2 for property located at Browns Mill Road. We have Ms. Pudney here to discuss this item.
Just give them a second to.
Quiet it down a little. Gotcha.
Mayor Fowler, Vice Mayor Murphy, and Commissioners, thank you for having me tonight. This is a request for rezoning on Browns Mills Road from R2, which is a low-density residential, to RP2, which is a planned residential district. The property is located off of I-26, between I-26 and Browns Mill Road. It is roughly, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me just explain the site here first in the request. It's the site between Browns Mills Road and I-26, and the request is to rezone it from R2 to RP2 for a recreational development of, for pickleball courts and indoor-outdoor pickleball and indoor volleyball courts, which is permitted in the RP2 zone. The RP2 has recreational uses, and it is, as it states in the section 6.10.2.2, recreation uses including a community center, a golf course, swimming pool, parks, playground, or other public or private recreational uses, and nonprofit clubs such as country clubs, swimming, and/or tennis clubs. The proposal for a pickleball recreation facility allows the recreational development while also keeping the property zoned residential rather than having a commercial property in a residential area. And as you can see on the current zoning, the site is in gray. It's vacant land. So that's what that gray area is. And the surrounding area around it is residential. The current future, the future land use calls for it to remain residential in that area. So this request, while allowing a recreational pickleball facility, keeps it zoned residential. And this is just a few more aerial views of the property. And as you can see, where this blue X is, going down 26 towards Browns Mills where the Walmart location sits, that's where you get your commercial businesses. So the staff found it reasonable to have an RP2 zoning request and not a B4 or commercial, and have that come up the corridor. The concept plan depicts 3 outdoor pickleball courts right here, and 2 recreational buildings that would house indoor pickleball. This building will have indoor pickleball courts, a small services area to buy drink like Gatorades and foods. And this building is proposed to have indoor volleyball courts. The proposal is to use it both operating as public and also hold tournaments for pickleball and volleyball. Parking requirements are 78 spaces, and they meet those requirements while providing an additional 40-ish spaces, and that's in case we all know pickleball is, you know, increasingly popular, and with these tournaments, they would rather have adequate parking in case those tournaments and it just customers come, so that there wouldn't be an additional parking issue. There is a sidewalk requirement, and the developer, in conjunction with our Public Works and Engineering Department, have determined that a sidewalk along Browns Mills on this end of the entrance would connect to the existing traffic circle further down on Browns Mills to that existing sidewalk, would be better suited for this project. Landscape yards, as you can see on the concept plan, have a buffer along the public right-of-ways, and there is also a type 1 buffer along the single-family housing parcel right here. And there is also a heavy natural wooded buffer as well, but the developer is proposing to have that type 1 buffer.
And there's no buffer up against the interstate?
Correct. We had our landscaping review determined that it wouldn't require a landscape buffer on the interstate.
You said there are three outdoor pickleball courts?
Yes, the
What about
3.
What about indoor?
I believe they're planning on having roughly 6 indoor courts, just based on the size of the building here, and then I'm not quite sure about how many volleyball courts, but it would be roughly 6 indoor courts here and probably something similar with volleyball courts, if not a little smaller, because volleyball courts are a little bit bigger.
I got a question about
Yes.
the sidewalk. How close is the closest sidewalk? Would that actually connect to a sidewalk?
Yes, let me back up real quick here. So there is a sidewalk, Butler Road. You can kind of see it where my cursor is, down to the traffic circle. So they're proposing, instead of, due to topographical and features and hardships for this, where a sidewalk would normally be proposed, they are proposing to have the sidewalk along the entrance exit of their building and then connect to the existing sidewalk here.
And so you're saying it's cost prohibitive or impossible to construct a sidewalk on down Browns Mill, is that right?
Along this property line, correct. The property slopes, and the sidewalk would not be able to meet the ADA standards. They would have to put railings and so forth. So, and really, we as staff didn't see how it would be kind of usable along the right-of-way here. And it's roughly the same distance of sidewalk that would have been installed here that it would be to connect to the existing sidewalk where that traffic pattern. So we're bringing that pedestrian traffic up to that recreational facility.
I guess, to me, I mean, I know all that other land could be developed, but it just seems like, to me, it would be better to have them put it into the sidewalk bank versus actually constructing a sidewalk there.
So with that, this property, and I'm going to try to answer that question to the best I can.
Sure.
Has been previously requested to be rezoned for high-density residential, And due to it basically being a fill lot from the construction of 26, it's very difficult to actually get any foundations, residential development in there. And that you can see with the sidewalk. So with that in mind, it was on our Public Works department, along with the engineer and developer of the property, thought it would be best to have it connect to an existing sidewalk rather than have almost a 2-to-1 slope sidewalk that wouldn't be able to use for wheelchair accessibility due to that slope, and have that instead connect to the existing sidewalk traffic circle.
Did you address the neighborhood meeting?
I haven't gotten to it yet, but
Okay.
yes, I will get
Oh,
there.
hang on.
Does that answer your question, hopefully?
Well,
You
did I
said-
misunderstand your question? My understanding was you were saying instead of making them build any sidewalk,
They just
take the
pay-
requirement and they pay into the fund and we build a sidewalk
Somewhere
elsewhere in
else.
Johnson City where it makes sense. Is
Yeah.
that what you
That's
meant?
what
So
I'm
I misunderstood
I'm
your
sorry.
question. I
When I said
apologize. No.
sidewalk bank, that, you were probably thinking the land
That,
bank.
the
the
actual bank.
of
So
land.
we
Sorry.
do have a fee in lieu option of sidewalks. It has to meet criteria. It's about 6 or 8 criteria. And one of that criteria is there's not a existing sidewalk within 1,500 feet of the property on the same side of the road. It does not meet that criteria. Another criteria is that it's not gonna, in order to have a fee in lieu, the project would not have an increase of pedestrians or people coming into that property. This obviously will, or hopefully will. So it did not meet the criteria for that fee in lieu payment.
I mean, I can see it either way. Just- I'd rather see a sidewalk built somewhere else.
Yeah, take the money
sooner.
from this one and put it on Nave.
Yeah.
And that could be something that we can work with our Public Works, with Jason Miles who's back there, the Director of Public Works. If that's something that the commission would like to have us discuss, we certainly can go down that avenue.
I could see it. I mean, tomorrow we could get a request for the lot on the corner of Butler and Browns Mill, but in all likelihood, it might be another 20 years before we see something there where we have sidewalk needs in other areas today. It's just the only thing I was thinking.
And that could be something that staff can analyze.
Thank you.
So just finishing up the concept plan. Concept plan is binding, so any additional, like the last presentation, any additional changes. This plan did have a change to the entrance. The first proposal had the entrance coming kind of around this corner adjacent to Chickasaw. Due to site distance concerns and just safety issues, they have moved it. And that was per our traffic team as well. So any changes such as that in this case would require a concept plan amendment, additional buildings. However, with the current zoning, and I know I previously spoke that it was previously requested for higher density, if it were to be built as is with its R2, it's roughly, it would allow for 14.6 single-family lots if someone came in and decided to put the money in to make it developable. The RP2 zone allows for 3.4 units per acre, which is 17 units, so it would only be an increase of 3 lots. That is, if this plan did not go through and pickleball was not a thing and it got rezoned and someone wanted to come in and develop it. However, there's no residential development being proposed. That was just a comparison of what's currently allowed and then what would the RP2 if single families were permitted. And these are just some renderings. These aren't binding. This is just something that the developer provided us to kind of put into view of what it would look like with the outdoor court, excuse me, and then the buffers along the road. So these are just for benefit of making it more visual.
knowing this isn't binding, but it looks like it's gonna be windows as the walls, is that right? Glass? I don't know.
That, I'm not sure. I do know it's gonna be, or not, I do know, but speaking regarding materials, we can't speak on
Right.
that part.
I'm just
But
curious.
they do have, they want it to make it look nice and fit into the surroundings, so it will,
It's not gonna be a metal building.
no, ma'am.
Until it is.
This is just another view of it. Going into utilities, water and sewer are available for the proposed development. There was no concerns from our water and sewer department due to really a few bathrooms and water fountains. There's not going to be much impact to our services. A traffic study was conducted, and any of those questions I can answer, but Anthony will probably have more detail on them. But a traffic study was conducted, and it was recommended a 50-foot turn lane on Browns Mill be required, as well as a deceleration lane, and these improvements would be at the developer's expense, and they are depicted on the concept plan.
Is there any assurance it's not a metal building? I mean, what would preclude that from happening?
So I'm not, I don't believe it's in any of our design or
It's not.
overlay standards. So it would have to be built to building code with the materials, and I can't ensure that it would not be a metal building. It would just have to be built to code.
Right, so it could look like the Dollar General on South Front, just so we're all clear. I mean, there's no assurance that this is gonna meet any design standard at all. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it needing no altar Dollar General, but it does look ugly.
Going into the neighborhood meeting, we did not have a lot of individuals in attendance. We did have maybe 6 or 7. It was held April 1st at 5 p.m. And the comments that we heard were, and concerns were an increase in traffic on Browns Mill and Chickasaw being used as a cut-through. Nefarious activities occurring in the parking lot after hours.
Did they use the word nefarious?
Yes.
I love it.
Yes,
It's a
they did.
$5 word.
And the developer ensured them that it would be, he's planning on having security cameras, and if that after-hour activity is going to happen, he will put gates on the property. He doesn't want that as well. The sound from pickleball games being heard by neighboring homes. As you can see,
Thanks to Act 26.
the closest single-family home is right here, and it's roughly very far away from the outdoor courts, and the indoor courts would be obviously buffered by the building, and then the landscape buffer and the wooded buffer.
And I-26 creates a lot of
Yes,
ambient noise.
that is correct.
Yeah.
And then possible site distance issues entering and exiting the property. This is something that our engineering and public works department will review for the site plan. It has to meet site distance requirements before any actual permits are issued. And on April 9th was the planning commission, and they unanimously approved the request to rezone the property. So with all of that, staff recommends approval to rezone the subject property from R2 to RP2 based on the following. The proposed development is compatible with the existing R2 district. It keeps it residential and low impact residential. The proposal conforms to the future land use plan by keeping it residential, maintains public health, safety, and general welfare, and is compatible with neighboring zoning districts. The proposed development maximizes the use of the land and does not drastically increase the allowed density. The land has sat vacant and has been tried to be rezoned for higher density and has failed due to not wanting higher density and just the ability to develop that land. So this allows for a lower impact and actually the best use of the land, which takes me into my last bullet, that the land has remained vacant for it's been historically vacant, and this request and rezoning will be able to maximize the use of the land.
Quick question, when you look at the houses around there, I'm guessing you only sent out letters to maybe one or two residents, I mean, within 200 feet, is that a pretty accurate assumption?
Yes, so our policy has 200-foot radius of all property lines, and we post the property, and we posted the property roughly.
There's been a big sign out there.
Yeah.
That was just my follow-up.
We put
do
two
have a big-
signs.
Big enough sign that
Mhm.
people in Shadowwood and all.
Yes, and we posted 2 signs, so. And most of this gentleman did come to the neighborhood meeting, and this residence in the Chickasaw development. But we do post signs as well.
And then Commissioner, I'm just gonna make a statement, since it says no bearing whatsoever. This is really a gateway into our city, you know, coming up through there and then we get off at State of Franklin. And, we have a lot of nice residential areas out there. I just really hope it will be attractive buildings that fit into the character that, like you said.
Mayor, would you entertain a motion?
I would.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and
It
a
was a
second.
very entertaining motion.
Any other discussion? All right, Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
The next item, 7.4, this is an annexation, and this is an owner consent annexation, which is called Whitehead annexation. This is to consider approval of a preliminary resolution calling for a public hearing on the proposed voluntary annexation of approximately 15.29 acres along Boones Creek and Old Boones Creek Road. We have Ms. Hodges here to present on this item.
Good evening. There are 2 items on the agenda. One is the first reading for the first reading for the zoning assignment, and the second one is for the annexation. If it pleases you, I would like to present those together and have separate motions.
Good.
So where we are talking about is Boones Creek Road and Old Boones Creek Road. Currently it is one tract of land, and what they would like to do is have the front part that is on Boones Creek Road be planned business. They would like to do a fitness center. They are currently not in the city limits. Now, they could develop this in the county, but they would like water and sewer, and so would like to be annexed into the city. The back side of the property, we kind of asked that the whole property come into the city, and so that would be an RP2. You look, if anybody wants to start with questions, okay. So in order to not have a split zone property, we would want a minor plat. There's some kind of things at the bottom, like eventually we will want a minor plat. Because of the RP nature and the planned business nature, a concept plan will need to happen eventually. It isn't part of this presentation tonight. You will see that later on as they prepare it. I've got some things that they have submitted, but it hasn't been gone to the Planning Commission yet. So, but those 2 zoning districts do have kind of a concept plan requirement. So I'm going to come back to this slide just to show you what it is in Washington County. It does this kind of slashed area. That's the part that is planned residential business district, which does allow for the uses. So the zoning assignments that they're asking for are very similar to what's already there, because the backside is a planned residential district as well. Just to kind of give you a context of what zoning looks like in this area. And I forgot, oh Lord, my memory. We're here. The next round, there will be a spot here that will show you that this is where we are, or what is proposed to be annexed. And just to kind of give you an idea of the zones that are around it. I'd like to come back to this slide.
The RP5 on the one before is the Ridges
It is, oh,
development.
yeah, wrong way. That's the Ridges, yes.
Yeah.
That's the Ridges, Boones Creek, the school.
Gotcha.
And this is an RP2. So what they're proposing is really right across the street as well.
And so where is the subject property on
It's
this
right
map?
here. I promise next time I will make this better. It's right here.
There, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk about a couple of little changes. We've already done a kind of the resolution to go and study it, so we've studied it. And we're at a point where we need to have, like tonight is the preliminary resolution to call a public hearing. Just about 3 weeks ago, there has been a change in a law that will take in effect in July. And that is how we notify for annexations. And so what we're gonna do with this one is I would call it practice. Because we don't have to notify this way, but I do think that it's really important that the law has been adopted and for us to kind of get used to what that would look like. So one of the things that we won't be able to do at this point would be to notify the county mayor and the commissioner where this would be. And we would do that basically before we brought it to you. The other major difference is the notification difference. It's gone from 15 days to 21 days. And then the other one is that we will be notifying property owners. It does specify in the statute that will be 200 feet, as well as giving indications of how large the sign needs to be, how many times it needs to be there, and what we need to do with our notification for the Johnson City Press is also changed. But everything else is pretty much the same. I just wanted to point that out, so if you get questions, we don't have to do it yet, but we would like to because we just think it's a good idea. Okay, continuing on. This in the future land use map is called to be residential. It's also part of the Boones Creek corridor study, which would lend to a similar use. We have done the request to proceed. Your star is here. And this is where we are right now. So all we're doing tonight is if you do want to call that public hearing, then pass the resolution in a separate motion. If the zoning assignment if you feel as though that's appropriate, you would vote in favor of it. If you do not, then we would need to take that back to the Planning Commission. But this is where we are, and then we'll start that notification process. That's just a little bit bigger. We'll come back to us. There's a site plan. We'll come back to that when it's actually the thing. This is kind of what they want it to look like. This will be before you. Their site plan will marry up from the Planning Commission at the last meeting. So you'll see this all again. And this is just to let you know that there is some, okay. So if you have questions about the numbers in the cost benefit analysis, a lot of it comes from, they don't know when they're really gonna start their residential. So I made some guesstimates is the best way to say that. So essentially about 8 years out, we kind of balance out costs and revenue wise. But the density they're asking for is the RP2, which is the 3.4, which could be up to 45 residential units. That's what I did the assessment based off of. That probably is not going to happen just because of topography. That might be a little difficult to reach that kind of density numbers. Just kind of want to give that as a background. So we do have, like everyone has chimed in on the plan of services. That was in your packet. If you have any questions, please let me know. And we recommend to annex the property and the zoning assignment.
Can you put up the one that has the drawing of how it's going to lay out?
Oh, yeah.
Parking
Oh,
lot
yeah.
and all that?
So you really want a concept plan. So this is just for the fitness center. They'll bring in a concept plan just for the fitness center.
So this would be binding?
This, when it's approved, it would be binding. It's not binding as part of the annexation. So if you're bringing it in, you're bringing it in. But once you bring it in, you're allowed to say yes.
So that doesn't have does it require a decel lane off of Boones Creek or anything?
It will, this is why I didn't want to show it too much because this isn't the one that's been to the Planning Commission.
Okay.
There were comments made to this. That was one of the comments. As well as providing buffers, parking numbers, and kind of getting a little more, showing the setbacks, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So you'll see it again, I promise.
Any comments?
Okay, so there's not, we'll start with 7.4, the annexation. Does anyone?
Make a motion to approve.
Second. A motion and a second on the annexation. Any further discussion?
I just have one other question.
Oh, wait. That's, 7.4 would be the assigning of PB. You want to do
Yes.
that
But
first?
you can do either
Either
one.
way? Okay.
Either way.
I just want to make sure we didn't mess up if there was an order.
Is access to this property also off of Old Boones Creek Road into the backside?
Yes.
Okay.
Likely that is how it will, like the residential will likely develop. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but because of the way that ridge runs, it seems as though that would be the logical
Easiest way
way.
to get to it.
And can I ask, I'm definitely not an expert in Robert's Rules of Order, but I believe that I have to read these in.
You have to read them in
I
order?
have to
Okay.
read them in order, so you would need to take the vote in the order, because I think I need to read the next one,
Okay.
and then have you vote on the next one,
7.4
even though the
first.
presentation's complete.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 4883-24 on first reading.
That's not the right.
That's
order.
not
Is
the
that not
one
it?
we've read, I've read, no, the annexation's the one we just.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Which one did you just read? He read 7.5. We're going to do 7.4
Oh,
first,
mine's
the annexation.
different. So it doesn't matter. So I got.
He's got the wrong numbers on his paper.
Yeah, mine's split.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
Do we need to,
Yeah, you probably need to withdraw your motion.
I will withdraw.
So you want to make a motion on
So
7.4
moved.
annexation. I have a motion.
Second.
And I have a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
And then the next item is 7.5, ordinance number 4883-24, an ordinance assigning planned business district and planned residential 2 to approximately 15.29 acres located along Boones Creek Road and Old Boones Creek Road.
That's the one I wanted to make a motion on.
Go
Would you like to?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Thank you. The next item for consideration is item 8.1. This is ordinance number 4879-24, and this is an ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee by changing from PB District to RP3 for property located at 3018 Ember Grove Autumn Ridge subdivision. We have Ms. Putney here to present on this one.
This is the third reading for this rezoning request, just planned business to RP3 for 33 single-family homes. We've, since the first and second reading and public hearing, we've not had any additional comments or concerns from neighbors or neighboring properties, so I can,
Any changes?
no changes as well.
Motion to approve. I have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
The next item under Other is item 9.1. This is to consider approval of a concept plan for Woodland Grove subdivision, tax map 090053 ID, parcel 087. And we have Ms. Putney again to present on this
Before we
item.
get started.
Vice Mayor wants to,
Yeah, I'd like to note that I have no direct interest in this agenda item. However, I have a business conflict with one of the parties involved. Therefore, I will be recusing myself from the discussion and voting.
go ahead.
This is a request for just a concept plan approval for the Woodland Grove subdivision. Give a little background of why this request is coming to you tonight. In our zoning ordinance, the RP zoning district has a concept plan requirement. Section 6.10.1.3 of the zoning code, each planned residential development requires a concept plan to be approved by the Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners to ensure that the development is compatible with the surrounding area. In this case, the preliminary plat submitted is acting as the concept plan. Typically, we see a concept plan come in with a rezoning. This property was annexed and given the RP designation, so it's already zoned properly. So this is just going through the channel of getting the concept plan approved so they can move forward with preliminary plat and development. The Planning Commission saw the concept plan and preliminary plat on April 9th and unanimously recommended approval. So just a little background on the location and the property. The property is located between Cooper Drive and Wood Hill Road. The property was annexed in 1996 and given the RP3 zoning designation. The proposed subdivision is creating 118 single-family lots. In the RP3 district, they're required to have 4,000 square foot minimum lot sizes with minimum lot width of 40 feet and the setbacks of 25 feet in the front, 7.5 on the side, and 25 on the rear when abutting a non-RP zoning district. The RP3 district allows for 8.5 units per acre. This property is 45.57 acres, which would allow for 387 units to be developed. However, and that's single family or multifamily. However, the proposed subdivision is only building 118 lots, which is well under that maximum allowed density. And the lots within their subdivision has a minimum lot size of 6,300 square feet, so they're providing larger lots than what is required.
Do you know if they plan to do any lot size averaging and, make the lots different sizes in there?
So we have the concept plan and preliminary plat here. So this is what it looks like. So the minimum lot size required is 4,000 square feet, and the what they're providing is 6,300.
Okay,
There's
so
no lot size average. That's the minimum lot size that's in the subdivision.
But they could if they wanted to.
Well, but they're not. I mean, they're very uniform looking.
Yeah, there's only a few bigger than that. They're mostly in the top left corner.
There we go. So the concept plan slash preliminary plat, but for tonight, the concept plan meets all of the requirements that we require. 15% open space is required, and 7.5% of that is active space. The plat or concept plan indicates 24% of open space, and 8 of that is active space with walking trails, picnic areas. So that exceeds the minimum requirements. Interconnectivity between vacant land to promote future development. The interconnectivity stub is between lots 115 and 116 down in here. So if this vacant lot was developed, we would have the interconnectivity of roads and.
What do those magenta dashes signify? They're sort of like a reddish pink. There's like 3 rows of them above those.
Yes.
And halfway up on the left.
What are those to convey?
I would have to take a look, and Brandon might know that answer. The developer.
Property lines, other homes.
Could be adjusted property lines. But I don't have that exact answer for you. It's outside of the property in question. New public roads are being constructed per the local street standards of the subdivision regulations. And sidewalks are being constructed on all new public streets and cul-de-sacs per section 4-3 of the subdivision regulations. There's a type 1 buffer along West Walnut. So there's single-family homes back here. So I believe those are the lot lines for the single-family homes. So there is a buffer going in between those properties that meet the minimum requirements. Well, they exceed the minimum requirements for the concept plan. So the concept plan, as it was submitted, meets all of the requirements for the RP3 zoning district, as well as being under the minimum or maximum allowed density that they would be allowed for the 45.5 acres. Utilities, water, and sewer is available for the subdivision. There was no concerns from that department. A traffic study was conducted, and recommendations for improvements were made and would be at the developer's expense. And this was a map created by our traffic division to kind of show the location of those improvements. Just an installation of a road sign on West Walnut and widening of Dresden, Woodhill, and Cooper Drive to local road standards. So they would have the minimum road right-of-way, and, because right now I believe there's 40 feet of right-of-way, and they would be brought up to 50.
Is this close to Willow Springs Park, someplace in that area, or?
There's
I kept trying to look at.
Huffine Road's right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
for Walnut.
It's in that area.
So with that, the concept plan meets the requirements of our zoning code, so staff does recommend approval of that concept plan.
Any discussion or motion?
Move approval.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy? Oh, Mayor Fowler?
Yes. Thanks.
Mayor, that is all the formal items we have on the agenda.
Any further statements from anybody?
No, I got you abstained.
You too?
No, sir.
Anything else tonight? No, sir. Seeing nothing else, I will close the meeting.
I marked you as abstained.